All right. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Best Self Blueprint. So, as you all know, the mission of this podcast is to bring on people with the knowledge, insights, and experiences that'll help you move that dial towards becoming the best version of yourself, whatever that means to you in your life. So, before we get going, this is a free resource, but I'm going to give the stereotypical YouTube spiel of if you like this video, there is a like button for that. If there's comments or questions you have, put them in the comments. And then if there's someone you know, whatever we end up discussing that could apply to anyone in your life, please share this with them. That's why we do this. But the guest I have on today is a very well accomplished human being in a lot of areas. He has founded his own company, Invent the Change LLC. He's a keynote speaker, teaches millions of young boys and girls about STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math, in order to help shape their and our future, just the future of the planet overall, with some bright young minds. And that's just in his work. Also in sports, he's absolutely dominated. He was on a fitness-based reality TV show that I'm not even going to act like I can pronounce the name of, but did really well on that. He won Master of the Rig, which is a world championship title back in 2017. He has over 50 podium finishes in OCR, and he will be attending American Ninja Warrior season 14. So I am so amped to get to talk with this guy, Jay Flores. What's going on, man?
Thanks, man. I appreciate all the nice words, and excited to touch on a lot of those different things and how I got there. So thanks for the opportunity to be here with you and hopefully inspire a few others to take a journey down towards some of their passions.
Absolutely. So, and they may be nice words, but you did them. So thank you for setting the parameters, right? Pushing people.
Thank
But
you.
I think, and I was just talking about before we hopped on, the most logical place for me to start is time management, because you have a business, you have training, you have all these things going on. What's your process to really make sure that you're not only able to fit everything in, but you're actually like present and optimizing each thing?
Mhm. Yeah. So one thing I learned early on that helped a lot with this is that there's no such thing as time management, which sounds like a terrible answer to start your question off with, but everyone has the same amount of time, right? I don't have an extra hour. I don't have this magic formula to like condense or slow down time. So the way I started looking at it was priority management. And that's what you're going to devote your time towards. Right. So people say, oh, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for that, but they definitely have time for whatever else they're doing during those portions. So it was part priority and just like understanding myself and where I wanted to go and deciding like, okay, these are the buckets that mean the most to me. And this is where I'm going to put my time. And fitness happened to be one of those because one, I was passionate about obstacle course racing, but also I wanted to stay healthy and energized for things in the business world. And so my business and my impact in STEM was another one of those. Family was another one, right? So those were the kind of the three ones that I started focusing on right away. And so it's like, Jay, like, how do you do your business and Ninja Warrior and obstacle course racing? Like, how do you do all these things? It's because that's what I put my focus on. And I reduced or eliminated a lot of those other things that weren't going towards that ultimate goal. And we all have those. I still have it sometimes. Like sometimes I still watch a little bit too much Netflix, or I might scroll through TikTok a little bit too long. But it's about being aware of that. And then like, how do you adjust things in your life so that you take away a little bit of that wasted time and dedicate it towards building something, whether that's your business or your relationship with a spouse or a family member or your fitness goals. It's really about dedicating that time and that energy towards your priorities.
Yeah, that was my biggest thing was, and I love that. I love that, like, you can't really like manage time. Time is what it is. It's going to pass how it passes. It's about leveraging priorities and focus. So that was, I think my biggest thing was, because I've got similar situation. I have multiple businesses on top of still working a job, on top of training, on top of still wanting to keep friendships alive every once in a while. And so I sometimes get that question of, and I ask myself all the time too, how are you not just keeping those things, but optimizing those things? And to
Mhm.
me, it actually came down to the small things. So you said it perfectly, like social media. people think, oh, well, I'm just scrolling through for a little bit. But it's like, if you really look per day, it's probably like hours that you're looking at social media, which is
Mhm.
crazy. So if you just set like some type of limiter on that, on TV, on computer games, video games, whatever it may be, yes, those are amazing, like leisure escapism activities.
Yep.
But what are you doing? I always say, like, what am I doing to earn the privilege to do those things, right? Like, did I move my body? Did I meditate? Did I build my business?
Yeah.
And if I can kind of check those boxes, awesome. Netflix it is, or whatever the outlet may be. But I absolutely love that. And so how did you develop that sense of prioritization? Because I think there are a lot of people who think, well, if I could really hone in on those top few things, I would do them, but I just have so many things that I want to do. How did you
Mhm.
filter out and really set that pecking order?
Yeah. So I took a long-term vision approach. I looked at it like, where do I want to be in 20 years? And you don't need to know exactly where you want to be. One of the other big things that a mentor of mine really helped out with was understanding that like your long-term goals are a volume. So it's not like a specific point, like I'm going to be this person on this day and this thing, right? Because the chances of that happening exactly the way you want it are very unlikely. And then people, once they miss a milestone, they feel like they failed, but it's more so like a level of excellence that you're setting for yourself. So you're looking for this volume of excellence. And then as you get closer, as you take steps in that direction, then you can start narrowing in towards what it actually is. So like maybe right now you're thinking, okay, like I want to be CEO of the company that I work for. Right. So you're setting the level of excellence around leadership and around commitment to learning to the skills that you need to get in that space. But as you go, maybe the world changes. You decide you want to be like the top known speaker in that same industry, but not necessarily the CEO of that company, or you want to be the top TikTok influencer in that space. Um, Maybe not the original thought or goal. And so I started thinking about like what kind of things are important for me to be able to do those things long term, and then kind of try to put those into the buckets that I mentioned earlier. But thinking of more just like broadly, so someone who's listening to this kind of concept for the first time, you just got to think about the things that you're really passionate about. Like what are those things that you spend time on and it doesn't feel like it's work, that you really enjoy, and start thinking about business ideas in that space. So let's say you brought up sports, right? Let's say that sports is that thing and you're like, man, but I don't want to give up sports. Like I love watching, I'm a Packer fan, right? I love watching the Packers. Um, Instead of eliminating that, maybe you think about different kinds of business ideas of how you could innovate in the world of sports, of how people watch sports, of how, I don't know, I work with kids that like try to create new helmet technologies and things along those lines. So I started thinking, because my previous role, my previous job before I got my own business was a role that never existed before that either. And so I started creating these worlds in what that didn't exist based on what my long-term passions were, and reverse engineered those kind of things. So just think about what you're really excited about, and then like what are potential jobs in that space right now, or what kind of things could you create in that arena.
Yeah, that to me was one of the biggest things. Was I was always consumed by, because I wanted to go into helping people just like make the most of life.
Mhm.
And I was taking the approach of finding a job that would allow me to do that. And it was one of those things where I was like, well, I could be a trainer, but that's fitness, or I could be a nutritionist, but that's just like the food intake. I could
Yeah.
be a mindfulness coach, but that's more just the stress. And it eventually kind of dawned on me like, oh, just start your own business, be that kind of accumulation of knowledge in all those different areas, and then you can have your dream job. Now,
Mhm.
I think for a lot of people, their dream job actually is a job that you can find and go
Yeah.
get, and it's nice and stable. So I don't necessarily feel the need to like push on everyone. You need to like start your own business and be your own boss and all that. But I love that idea of finding what at least this is the way I would paraphrase what you said.
Mhm.
Find what you would do for free as long as you knew you had like food in the fridge and a roof over your
Yeah.
head and all that, and then try to like make the most of that.
Yep.
Because I'm not all in on, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I think no matter what you do, there's going to be times where it calls for some stressful situations and challenges and things like that. But at least then it's exciting, right? You have a
Yeah.
reason to pursue those things. The last thing I want to touch on is you talked about it evolves, right? I mean,
Mhm.
you learn as life progresses, you change as life progresses. If you didn't, life would get pretty boring. And so don't expect, your passions and interests and desires now to be the exact same in 10 years. And I think if they are, you might want to check in on like what you've been doing to grow as a person over the last 10 years. So
Exactly.
I absolutely love that ideology. Now, kind of backtracking to talk about a different aspect of this, what do you say to people who they know their passion, they know what they're looking to do, but they just can't seem to get off TikTok, or they can't seem to watch that one last episode of Netflix and not click next episode? What's your advice to people in that mindset?
That one's tough because it depends on why you're on there, right? So what if you just on TikTok because you really like TikTok, then my advice would be figure out how to run your business on TikTok.
Mm.
Like there's people that it's crazy what I see on live now, right? There's people playing Wordle, getting paid by TikTok and followers, getting thousands of views and likes, right? You could like taste peanut butter on TikTok. And I'm sure there's a way that like people would go around, and follow that. There's the guy that peeled the eggshell off of an egg without breaking it. And people watched him for hours and hours. It's crazy what can go viral nowadays. And you can just be that expert of what you love on TikTok. It's not just dances anymore. It's not just whatever these original trends were that people thought, oh, that's just for kids. It's really kind of taken on a lot of different worlds. And so if it is because of that, then I would go in that space. If it's because you are kind of distracting yourself with it instead of actually, it's kind of just a time thing, I would start to think about maybe what's holding you back and potentially in terms of fears. Like it's oftentimes you're going to that space so you don't have to think about the hard stuff, right? And what are those maybe couple baby steps that you could take to start making motion towards your goal without it going too crazy? So for example, when I was starting my business, one of the weirdest, simplest things that took me so much time was like, which business credit card do I pick and which bank account, which business bank do I start with? And those like looking back, I should have just, made that decision pretty quickly, but it took a couple of days that like really I was freaking out and like, you don't know what you don't know. But you don't want those that like anxiety or that fear originally to keep you from doing the really cool things of your business, right? So instead of freaking out about the credit card and going to TikTok to distract yourself or whatever other distraction you were mentioning, just try to take that, like drop down a couple of those baby steps. Like I just need to get these couple, 2 or 3 things done just to get the ball rolling. And then once you get through that, then the better things on the business started coming through. And I was like, it's so funny that my business credit card was the big challenge of the day, when now I'm able to do all these really cool things I wouldn't have done if I would have been crippled by that, decisions like that.
Yeah, that I have pretty much the exact same answer to that question. I think the most important thing is if you do realize like, oh, I keep escaping, right? I keep trying to distract myself. It's like, okay, what from?
Mm-hmm.
Like what is it that you're trying to escape? What is it?
Yeah,
Because I think a lot of people just think, oh, well, I'm just procrastinating. No, you're trying to escape from something. So let's
exactly.
go into it. Like, are you scared you're gonna fail? Do you think that you have some type of limitation? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
once you narrow that down, if it's a fear, well, then it's just basically bringing your logic mind back in and thinking, okay, logically speaking, even if I fail, like what's going to happen? Nothing
Yeah.
bad. Okay, cool. Let's just start doing it. Or if it's a limiting belief, okay, do I really not have that skill set? And is that going to set me back? Awesome. YouTube teaches you everything you need to know about
Yes.
everything nowadays. Go on YouTube,
That's where I
develop the
went to
skill set.
decide.
And so I'm really growth minded in the sense of if you're escaping because of a sense of fear or lack, that's something that can be overcome. You just have to have the courage. I mean, courage isn't a lack of fear. It's the willingness to pursue the thing despite being fearful. And so
Mhm.
you just need the courage to like step into it enough that it's like that foot in the door. It's kind of like if you don't want to
Exactly.
go for a 20-mile run, so you're like, I'll just go for one. And then at the end of the one, you're like, okay, now I feel good. Let's go the rest of the 20.
Yeah.
So yeah, I absolutely love that mindset. Now, there's one quote in particular that I found when I was going through all your social media and everything. And I want you to explain this because
Mhm.
I freaking love this quote, but I think there might be some people who are just curious as to what you mean by it. And it was
Yeah.
failure. It was like failure in pursuit of growth is better than success within your comfort zone. So if
Yeah.
you could
So it's
explain that.
what was it? Failure with growth is greater than success in your comfort zone. And so this was in reference to my ninja training, my ninja warrior training at that moment, but definitely applies to anything that you're trying to do. People are so afraid of failure. They're afraid of what people are going to think or say that it keeps them from doing the things they need to do to really have those big breakthroughs, to really be able to innovate and launch a business that is successful, or even just to be able to, kind of build up your ladder within the company that you're trying to have success in. And that's because that's where all of the learning happens is, and it's not just necessarily like, we're not thinking of like catastrophic failure, like you're going to go and blow things up every single day. Right. But it's really getting towards the outer edge of your comfort zone and living there, getting comfortable living there, because that's where the growth happens. If you keep doing things and you keep checking the boxes and you're doing well within your comfort zone, it's going to feel safe and comfortable, but you're not going to grow. You're not going to have any experiences greater than that success that you've experienced. Now, if you're always pushing on that edge, sometimes going beyond it, it's going to lead to learning that is going to take you to the next level. So for example, on that obstacle, um, I failed. Like I peeled off the back and I slipped. I thought I was gonna get it, and then like right on the last swing, I shot backwards in the wrong direction because I couldn't hold on anymore. But now I learned, like, when I approach that one, I need to focus on a good front swing so that I can go on one swing and attack it the next time. And it's not going to be that hard for me. If I wouldn't have been willing to try that in practice in a real competition, if something like that came up, I would have failed again. Now, if I see something like that in competition, I'm going to be able to take it on. And that's another key thing, is try to find places and opportunities where it's okay to fail, whether that's like, for example, like we just said with fitness, where it's in practice versus in a competition, but more so in the business world. Like, is there an R&D group within your company? Or are there like different types of projects that you can go on that are more like experimental, where you're allowed to like go out and break things and figure things out? Are there like community organizations that you can volunteer with, where you might take on a little bit more responsibility than you'd be comfortable at work because you're getting paid and could get fired, versus being a volunteer and just trying to do good? There's a lot of places where you can learn and grow those skills and fail a little and not have like these super scary consequences. But just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, as some people will say, or getting comfortable with living on the edge of your comfort zone, is what's going to take you to the next level and allow you to have that those exciting experiences later on.
For sure. I don't know why, but the question that keeps popping in my head that I really want to ask you, because you not only like do like videos and stuff for kids, but you actually are interacting with these STEM kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as an adult, what lessons have you learned from the kids from working with them? Because I feel
Yes.
like when you're working with kids, they teach you as much, if not more, than you're teaching them. So what are some of like
Yep.
the main takeaways that these kids have taught you when you're interacting with them or watching them just like dive into their passions?
Yes. I love working with especially the younger kids. Like, a lot of stuff I design is more so for like that middle school age range, because that's when kids are kind of making decisions on what they might do in life and what's possible and not possible for them. But I really like the like 6 and 7 year olds, because they have like this vision of the world that a lot of things are possible for them still. Like, right, they understand certain things are not possible, but their brains still allow them to like be very creative and curious and explore areas that, for whatever reason, as adults we've been told no too many times, or we failed. And you start to have that fear of like thinking big. but kids are always thinking big. And so I'll give you a couple examples that are just fun from experiments we've done, because I always ask them for like real life examples, because I want them to see the science, get involved in doing it, also learning kind of like what the science behind the tricks we do are, the experiments we do. But then I also want them to think about real life applications, because that's what then encourages them to take this on as potentially a career in the future, and not just like a fun experiment that we did. And so there's one time where I asked them for an explanation, a real life example of this thing. It's called nitinol. It's also known as memory metal. So when you heat it up to a certain temperature, if you've deformed it, it goes back into its original shape. It's called like a transition temperature, like that it has like a memory for. And so it'll go back into the original form in which it was created. And that's just crazy, because you're just adding heat and it just starts moving on its own. It's very magical and cool. And so I asked them for a real life example, and the kid raised his hand. He says, we should make a car wash. And I was like, no, I'm talking about the memory metal, not the water experiment that we did earlier. I was just like really confused to his connection point. He's like, no, it makes perfect sense. Like when you get into an accident, you just drive to the hot car wash and your car goes back into its normal shape, instead of like having to spend all this money on getting it fixed or having your car totaled, right? And so I was like, oh my, you're a genius, child. And like, we should start this company right now. And there may be other limitations to nitinol and to whether it's, safe or it could be used in cars or anything, but that doesn't matter in that moment. What matters is that that child has this awesome idea. And then now let's reverse engineer. What does the world need to look like? What needs to be able to happen in order for that to be the case, instead of us just accepting that when we get into a car accident, we're probably going to have to buy a new car. We're going to spend a lot of money trying to get it repaired. And so I want, what I learned from youth is just like, view the world not as what people say it is or how it's been. View the world as like how you want it to be, and then reverse engineer what it takes to get there. Someone like Elon Musk is really good at that, right? He says there shouldn't be traffic, but there is, and our current system is going to like keep it that way for a long time, right? It's not going to get any better. So what if we dug tunnels under LA, right? And you just think of these crazy ideas that he's actually starting to make possible, right? And he wants people to live on different planets. Well, what does it take? And part of that is reusable rockets. So he starts designing those things. So just look at like where you, and this goes for your own goals in life too. Like, don't think about like what someone else in your community did or what people at your school or your major do. Think about where you want to go, and then start reverse engineering what it takes to actually make that world possible.
Dude, you are talking about the most pivotal point probably in my entire life, was finally readopting that childlike mindset of basically like, I mean, I didn't say this as a kid, but like, no bullshit, what would it take? And
Exactly.
so like for the longest time, I succumbed to that mindset of, well, this is what the world has presented to me. This is the evidence, pattern recognition, social norms, all of that kind of clumped into this very like bubble version of what reality is. And all of a sudden, I don't even remember what it was. It was probably a series of events that all of a sudden popped that bubble for me. And once you hit that, like you're talking about that big thinking, I almost call it limitless thinking. I mean, Albert Einstein was the one famous for saying, knowledge gets you from A to B, but imagination gets you everywhere. And that really is it. I think and I believe that's what power is, right? Like if you can imagine a better world in any aspect and go out and make that better world reality, that's power. Like that's powerful. And so, oh man, that's something I always say the quote, like, I want to always be childlike with removing being childish. So not throwing temper tantrums or, wetting myself or anything like that, but still having that childlike curiosity and passion and energy and presence, I think is huge. And yeah, so that's something. I haven't been coaching kids or working around kids for a little over a year now, but that's when you get around like you said, like 7, 8, 9-year-olds, you really see that just carefree spirit. And it's so invigorating because it reminds you, oh, right, that's actually a thing. You can still do that, even though now you have facial hair and your voice is a little deeper. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
for any parents that might be listening, try to keep that alive in your kid as long as possible and keep inspiring and encouraging that, because that's what's going to open so many doors for them. The world that they're going to be living in, we have no clue what it's going to look like. I mean, Twitter, like I saw this thing a while back. It's changed obviously because LeBron hasn't had as much success in the last couple of years, but I think it was the first time that he missed the playoffs with LA. Prior to that, he had not been out of the playoffs since Twitter was invented, right? And so just to think of like that span, Twitter didn't exist. All those jobs, all those things that are happening with social media didn't exist before. And kids right now, one of the biggest things that they're excited about in terms of future careers, if you start asking your kids what they want to be, a lot of them will say YouTube influencer, right? And a lot of parents will say that's not a real job. You should think about a real job. What I encourage parents to do instead is, what are some of the skill sets that you could get that are helpful for YouTube that also kind of apply to things nowadays or careers that you see in the future that would make them better now, so that if their passion really is YouTube, they can go down that path and they can explore it and start doing cool things. Hopefully they blow up and they do very well and they enjoy the rest of their life tasting peanut butter on YouTube, or opening toys, or whatever it is, doing educational talks on YouTube, whatever that may be. And if not, then maybe they learned about social media marketing. Maybe they learned about search engine optimization. Maybe they found out different ways to edit video that made them marketable to companies that create content. Like there's all kinds of other skills. So no matter what your kids' dreams are, just like lean into that, and then find some like current real life, or like what you think of is going to be future jobs that can tie into it, so you can feel a little better, I guess. But really lean into what they want to do. I wanted to be a crossing guard when I was a kid at some point. So like if you think about like what my career aspirations were at that time, but like my parents were cool. They're like, you're going to be the best crossing guard ever. And I'm pretty sure they're like praying, like, I hope he doesn't really want to be a crossing guard for the rest of his life. Nothing wrong with crossing guards, but I think that's usually a volunteer opportunity. And so like just lean into that and allow them to explore their passions, because eventually they're going to find something in that space that allows them to be very successful.
Well, and I think the other thing too is remembering your kids are not an outlet for you to relive your childhood, right? So like they are children, and there are plenty of people, this is an opinion, this is not a fact by any means, but to me, if you're super hard on like an 8-year-old in their basketball tournament and you make them like cry after the game if they didn't play well, it's like, man, that kid's going to be scarred for years after that. He's not going to want to pick up a basketball. And like we had one kid back in middle school, his parents, everyone knew his parents were dad was super tough on him. And he was known for, in basketball games, he would look more at his dad than he would at the court, because he was always, in my opinion, he was probably just always nervous that if he did something wrong, he was going to get scoffed at or yelled at or talked down to, and it really strips you away of just being a kid, right? Just being present, enjoying that weird, crazy journey of doing fun, exciting new things and leaning into your passions. So yeah, that was just something I was really curious about as someone who not only works with kids, but works with kids who are inherently imaginative and curious and inventive. So yeah, that was more just for my own personal benefit, but I think there were a lot of gold nuggets in there. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is belief, because for you haven't just had a lot of success in one thing. You do pretty dang well at like everything you do. Like if you commit to something, it almost seems like there isn't really a question, and there may be in your head, but from the outside, it seems like you're just very like, all right, I've committed. I'm going to make sure I do what it takes. I mean, 10 years before you got on to American Ninja Warrior, but you kept at it.
Yeah.
What is your mindset, or how has it evolved as you take on these new or bigger pursuits in any area of life?
Yeah. First of all, I have to say I'm extremely blessed to have had parents that when they said you can be whatever you want to be, they like actually meant that and spoke that into me. And whether there's ever any doubt about that, I think that's something that you should always share and believe in your kids, and people that you care about, regardless whether they're children, family members, friends, etc. Because there's going to be moments where then they have to make a decision, and someone's going to say, oh, you should be this, or oh, you could do this. And if they have that mindset from early on, then they're going to go after those opportunities. And that's how I ended up in engineering, because my parents always said, those kind of things, like that I could be whatever I wanted to be. And then when a teacher said, hey, you're doing good in my math class, or you're very curious and you're very creative, you might want to consider engineering. I was like, sure, let me go figure it out. Like, instead of like, oh no, engineering is like really hard because of math and science or whatever. Like I had that kind of like ability to do that. But part of it is also your own mindset, right? So you need to think of like, the, like thoughts that are going to take you down that path versus that aren't. And instead of thinking of like what could go wrong or what are the limitations that you have, I always think about what are my strengths. And that was one of the a book actually that I helped me in college. It was called Strength Finders. There's still a version of it. It's basically an assessment that you take, and then it gives you your top 5 strengths. And then you go into like learn about different careers or different kind of characteristics of those strengths, and how you might be able to apply them to other areas of life. And so I adopted a strengths-based mindset, right? There's always going to be reasons why, for example, I'm pretty short, right? So I'm not like Mega Wall on Ninja Warrior is something that's going to be really hard for me. But I'm not going to keep the 6th obstacle from keeping me from getting through the first 5, right? I'm going to think about what are my other strengths as a ninja, or what are my other strengths in this business pursuit that are going to allow me to succeed. And then if there are any weaknesses or doubts that pop up, I think, okay, is this something that I can learn? Or is this something I need to get some coaching with? Or is this something that I need someone else to do for me? But either way, I can't let that weakness or that doubt be a reason why I don't go down this path and why I don't succeed. So that kind of combination of surrounding myself with people that believed in me, originally with my parents, and then just with good friends and good people afterwards. And then adopting the mindset that I don't have to be perfect. I just have to figure out what my strengths are in this space to succeed, have allowed me to then take those on. And then the biggest secret though is, am I really passionate about this? Because that's what gets you to push through those hard moments, right? When you get rejected by Ninja Warrior 9 times, do I still love this? Is this something that's important to me? That's harder to give up on than if you just look at it from a rejection standpoint, right? I also tie my passions to community and family and bigger things, because it's easy to give up on yourself, but it's really hard for me to give up on my younger cousins. It's really hard for me to give up on people that I care about. And so when I make it about bigger than just my personal success, it helps me keep going when that doubt creeps in or that hard day comes by. And as you mentioned earlier, it's not always going to be easy. Just because it's your passion, it doesn't mean it's going to be simple now because you found your passion. But it's okay to then understand that, like, okay, this is one of those tough days, but I love this overall. I'm going to either push through this that day, or just say, hey, today I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a relaxing day, and tomorrow I'm going to grind again because I need some rest or whatever it may be. So in a nutshell, it's, I was very blessed with my parents, and then I can continue to surround myself in environments that were like them, that believed in me. And then I worked on my own mindset and understanding my strengths, and surrounded myself with things that would help with any weaknesses or doubts.
It's so fascinating to me. I think I have yet to sit down with like a high achiever that when I talk about mindset, they bring up the word blessed or grateful or just appreciative. And that's something that, that is a non-negotiable daily habit of mine, is just expressing gratitude to be here, to be able to do what I'm doing, meet who I'm meeting, achieve what I'm achieving. But there are 2 things that I really want to dive into. One is, at the beginning of every podcast, and I always say this, be your best self, whatever that means to you. So that can change on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis, where there may be days where you're feeling great and you crush your workout and you crush every phone call you make and you crush every part of that entire day. And then there's those days that you wake up and you just feel like flatline. And so your best self is going to be very different in those situations with how you're feeling and what you're going into it with. Now, there are plenty of ways to prime your energy and physiology, but just keeping in mind, like, just because you're not at peak performance doesn't mean you can't be at optimal performance in that given moment. And just not being too hard on yourself if you're not always at peak performance, because you won't be. I mean, that's just not how energy works in terms of our experience as humans. But the other thing that I really want to touch on is, you talked about it's easy to quit on yourself, but it's way more difficult to like think about someone else and essentially going up to them and saying like, yeah, I'm giving up on you. And that's the way I see it too. So with things as simple as races, like when I'm doing these like longer races, like the marathon distances, the 24 hours or things like that, I always think about like the thing that always is popping in the back of my head, or even on days that I don't want to work out, I just think, be the example.
Yes.
Like someone is watching you, whether you're aware of it or not. Even if you feel like you're a nobody, I guarantee you there's somebody out there who looks up to you to inspire them. And if you quit, they're going to see that. And so that's what I always think of is, like, I've got this 4x4x48 challenge coming up. I don't know if you've heard of that, the David Goggins one.
Yeah.
And last year I did it, and first of all, I was an idiot. I didn't run it in running shoes. I ran it in cross trainers, which was just a horrible idea.
Not a good idea.
But my feet were all jacked up. And like towards the end, I was like, all right, no, I'm done. I'm out. This is stupid. But then I just kept thinking about, no, there are probably a lot of people that if I do this, will look at that and think, okay, what can I do that I didn't previously think I could? And so I want everyone listening to just think about that. Think about, like, if you're quitting because you feel like you're failing and you are actually passionate about this thing, and just because it's difficult, that's kind of that, you'll know if that's like the core reason you're quitting. You just can't really like escape it. I urge you to think about who else you're letting down, because it usually isn't just yourself. And if you're religious or spiritual or anything like that, you got God to answer to. So maybe think about that if you're looking to just throw in the towel. And so that, I just think that's so important. I mean, just think about who you're fighting for, and just imagine having to go to that person and just be like, yep, I quit. I stopped. I threw in the towel. So I absolutely love that. But I will start to wrap it up here. I know you're a really busy guy, but I've got one last question. But before I ask it, I just want to thank you for coming on, taking time out of your training, your business, your speeches, your everything else you've got going on. Everything you said today, I feel like could be clipped into like a short and it would blow up. Like, there was nothing you said that just kind of like went by. And that's such an adage to who you are as a person. Like, everything that you do it's either making an impact on yourself, your family, your community, or the world in general. And so I want to thank you for being that example. That's actually why I wore this shirt today, is I feel like you are a prime example of living a great story. So I wanted to represent a little bit with that. But yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time and just for setting the example for, I mean, the world.
I appreciate it, man. And thank you for all you're doing to help spread these types of stories, because we need it everywhere. Everyone could use that little boost, that one little nugget that could be a difference maker for them.
Heck yeah, man. So just wanted to make sure I let you know that before I ask this last question. But one thing I'm always curious about, and this is just entirely for me, what right now for you in your life is the next step in you becoming your best self?
Next step in me becoming my best self. So
maybe it's winning American Ninja Warrior.
I mean, that would definitely help. There is something there though. So one of the things that I'm trying to do is, I feel like my passions, although sometimes connected, still are often viewed as these two different worlds. And Ninja's starting to help me bring them together. And we kind of touched on some of these things earlier when you were talking about like being the change and stuff. And my business is called Invent the Change. So the idea is that it's great to be the change you want to see in the world, right? We all need to be good people and we need to influence those around us. But if you can invent the change you want to see in the world, then you are impacting people forever, potentially. And you're impacting people that you'll never even meet, talk to, etc. Right. And so I think Ninja is going to be a good opportunity for me to get that message out there and be kind of that face of a movement around preparing youth and people in general, but how passionate I am about youth to invent the change they want to see in the world. And a big piece of me for that is representation, and that's in my background as a Hispanic person, but also in terms of other areas that are underrepresented in the space, in terms of young girls that often might not be driven down this path, or people that are just born in a different zip code and don't have access to the type of resources that I'm trying to share with students. And so being able to package that message in a way that can reach more, and specifically to those areas that might not have it in their support system, because that's what's then going to inspire those kids to reverse engineer the world, as we were saying before, and do really impactful things. So instead of raising cancer money for cancer, I want to raise the person that cures it, right? And so it's the packaging of that message in a way that is just that everyone is able to connect with. I'm hoping the show will be a big part of that, but if not, I'm still going to have to figure out how to do that myself, because that could truly be game changing.
That's phenomenal, man. I absolutely love that. And I've never really thought about that, next step further of yeah, you can set the example, but what if you invent a new example to set? I freaking love that. Yeah, that's awesome.
There's a kid that I worked with on an innovation challenge that we hosted at my previous company, and he invented the anti-bully backpack, right? So bullying is something that we would think of a be the change you want to see, right? We need to try to discourage bullying and stand up for kids and that kind of things. But he took it from a technical aspect as well, right? So if we don't have the change we want to see there, how could technology help in that space? That's one fun example of how it's done. But in general, it's just how do you have the tools and resources to shape the world that you want from an early age, so that it's not later on you don't have the resources or knowledge to be able to do it, but from an early age you're able to feel yeah, I can make a difference here.
Well, I can tell you right now, you are absolutely making a difference here. So, dude, thank you for coming on again. For people who want to follow you, connect with you, where any social media or anything you want to let them know about, I'll also put it in the comments. But where can people follow just to keep up with whether it's ninja training, STEM teachings, all the other crazy stuff you're doing? Where can people check it out?
Yeah, so my handle for Instagram and TikTok is at J Flores Inspires. So JayFlores and then Inspires. If you want to look me up on LinkedIn or YouTube, just look up my name, Jay Flores, should be fine. And if for whatever reason you can't find me on one of these platforms, if you go to jfloresinspires.com and you scroll all the way down, there's the little links to each of my social media accounts. So feel free to connect. I'm more than happy to connect and interact on all of those platforms. Instagram and TikTok have a good mix of ninja stuff right now, but then also a lot of the experiments that I do for kids. So if you have kids or you want to engage in science in new and fun ways at your school or in your community, definitely check those out.
Heck yeah. Give him a follow, people. Just even the fact that these experiments are for little kids, I was going on and looking at them. I'm like, I really want to do that now. I want to try that experiment. But awesome, man. Thank you again to everybody listening. Thank you so much for tuning in, especially if you make it to this point. It humbles me so much to know that there are people like you, whoever's listening out there, who are investing, about an hour, 50 minutes? I don't know. Time flies when I'm doing these. Invested this much time into learning, growing, and just experiencing new mindsets, new perspectives, new experiences. So I'm so grateful for everyone who tunes in. So grateful for everyone who spreads the word about this podcast. Thank you so much. Again, like, comment, share, subscribe, whatever else you can do, just do it. Thank you guys so much. Jay, thank you. And everyone, we will catch you next time.